Hey friends, welcome to Sabbath School Daily, where we have been studying from this lesson right here, Ephesians. This week we're studying from lesson number 12, which has the title, The Call to Stand, and today is Sunday's lesson, which has the title, Battle Speech. Today's lesson revolves around Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10 through 20. I want to read it for you. I know it's 10 verses, but I want you to get the context. I want you to get the atmosphere of what we're talking about today and for the rest of this week. Look at what it says. Finally, brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this dark age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having girded your waist with the truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all perseverance and supplication for all saints. And for me, that utterance may be given to me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that in it I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. You know, today's lesson reminds me of different battle speeches given to armies about to wage war throughout history. Moments where the general or the commander comes out and motivates his troops in order to face the danger that will come, in order to face everything that they're up against. Here, the apostle, he himself identifies him as an ambassador for Christ in chains. An ambassador for Christ in chains. That is such an appropriate description of the Christian life. Ambassadors of Christ, often in chains. However, here we find that there is a lot going on in the background of the text. There's a lot of structure to it. The lesson itself gives us some really good insight into what's going on. So I'd like to read what the author said about this here in the first paragraph of today's lesson. He says that Paul concludes Ephesians with a call to battle, urging believers to take their stand in the church's war against evil. He begins with an overarching exhortation to be strong in the Lord in verse 10, which he repeats as a call to put on the whole armor of God in verse 11. He supports this call by specifying a purpose, which is to be able to stand against the devil's schemes, and by offering a rationale. The battle is against powerful spiritual forces of evil. That's in verse 12. In a detailed way, Paul then reissues the call to arms. Believers are to take up the whole armor of God in order to stand firm in the battle. That's in verse 13. Then, donning belt, breastplate, shoes, shield, helmet, and sword, that's 14 through 17, Paul invites believers now fully armed and ready to enter the fray to do what soldiers on the ancient battlefield might do, and that is pray. You'll see that the apostle here, he draws from experiences in the Old Testament where the children of Israel, they were called to stand for God. They were called to go out, wage war. But the interesting thing, at least when it comes to the Old Testament Israelites, you'll see that they always found problems. They always failed whenever they trusted in their own strength, in their own might, in their own resources, strategies, and mechanisms of doing things. However, when they did what was right, when they battled on their knees, when they fought relying on the God of heaven, who was their warrior, who was their defender, who was the God that went ahead of them into battle. That's why he's called the Lord of hosts in the Old Testament, the Lord of armies, the God that goes in the place and fights for his people. And so here you understand that the Apostle Paul, he's kind of bringing up, he's reminiscing on these Old Testament realities where the children of God are called to rely on their God as what we're supposed to do as well. Not only the church in Ephesians, but the New Testament church, the church that's facing all of its pressures at the tail end of the first century, and for ourselves that are facing the tail end of history of humanity, the history of planet Earth. We're called to rely not on ourselves, not on our strategies, not on our ways of doing things, not on our numbers, our resources, our strengths, our talents. No, we're called to rely on the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel that still to this very day fights for his people. That's why this battle speech was intended to motivate, to encourage, to raise up the morale of the troops that were going through such severe times. Friends, we're going through severe times. If you look at the world around us right now, the world is vomiting its demons, revealing that things are not going well. We see people destroying each other, people angry at each other, people sad, people broken, people suffering, people in pain, confused and fearful of everything around them. Friends, we live in a very, very dark time. However, the God of the Bible defines himself as the God of light. He is the light of the world. He is the truth of the world. He is the life, the resurrection. He is the true way. All of these declarations of identity that God, in the person of Jesus Christ, attributes to himself, that is ultimately ours in him. That is offered to us. His authority is offered to us. And here, as he tells us to put on the armor of God, we are called not only to defend ourselves with this armor, but to go out into this dark, weary, tired world and bring back home those who are lost in it. May you be a warrior of Christ. As you study your lesson this week, please put on the whole armor of God. Put on the breastplate of righteousness. Put on the belt buckle of truth. Put on the shoes of peace, the helmet of salvation. Put on the shield of faith and the sword of the word, the truth of God. And I'm sure that at that point, you will be a mighty warrior in God's army. May he bless you. Please remember, study your lesson. Look up these Bible verses. They will inspire and encourage you. I am sure of it. Please remember also, if you have any questions or any comments, write them down below. I'd love to engage with you. Also, please remember to like, to share, and to subscribe to our videos. We release one every day, and I hope to see you again here tomorrow for another Sabbath School Day.